Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where it seems that massive attacks begin. The Russians begin their own massive attack, and it seems that the Ukrainians are launching their own massive attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. According to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, during the previous night the Russians used 233 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and this is the biggest number of drones since the beginning of this week. This is not the biggest attack since the beginning of the conflict, but during the previous week this is the biggest attack that was carried out by Russians. The Ministry of Defense of Russia also reported that during the previous night they intercepted and destroyed 208 drones of the armed forces of Ukraine, and this is also the biggest attack carried out by the Ukrainians since the beginning of this week. So which means that both the Russians and the Ukrainians begin attacking each other, and most likely during the next waves they will use more drones to attack the territories of each other. And you know that this massive attack is a very interesting one, because we have a lot of interesting details this morning that give us understanding of what exactly is going to happen during this weekend. So let's discuss everything in details. And to understand what is happening, first let's talk about the most important update. According to information we have, several Russian drones attacked the territory of a NATO state, attacked the settlement by the name of Galați, which is located in the eastern parts of the state of Romania, which is a NATO member. We have a lots of videos on this matter, so we have a lots of updates. For example, here we have Romanian authorities issued alerts shortly before the impact. There are several injuries. Furthermore, we have this video. Here we can see the consequences of attack. So the NATO countries, the European countries, authorities reported that the Russian drone attacked the territory of Romania, or at least the Russian drone fell on the territory of Romania, dealing damage to some buildings, probably even to civilians. For example, in this video we can see the moments when the Russian drone attacked the territory of Romania and the building probably in the central part of the city. So we have an explosion, and here we have the building. We can see what exactly happened in this area. So obviously this is not the moment when the NATO countries are going to use the NATO's fifth article, but obviously lots of very interesting consequences we might see from this attack. So this is probably already the consequences. Now let's discuss how everything was developing from the very moment of this situation in the Odesa region and in the eastern part of Romania. So if you ask my opinion, I don't think that the Russians attacked this settlement. Maybe the Russian drone was attacking the city of Galați, but I'm not sure that the Russian drone was controlled by Russians. So let's start from the beginning, and first, once again, I would like to remind you that yesterday, during the 28th of May of 2026, we received lots of very interesting updates from the Black Sea. According to information we have, 3 tankers were attacked by drones off the northern coast of Turkey, according to Reuters. The tankers were hit approximately 80 kilometers north of the Turkey area of the Black Sea at the time of the incident. So the sources are saying that these vessels were moving from the territory of Russia, from the Russian ports, in the direction of the international waters, which means that these vessels probably had Russian cargo on board. And later we received this video published by Turkish sources, and this video we can see these commercial vessels, and the most important, we can see a Ukrainian unmanned vessel that was located right below this commercial vessel. We can see the word police written in Ukrainian language. So according to these 2 articles, 3 vessels were moving from the territory of Russia in the direction of the international waters, and these 3 vessels were attacked, according to these updates, by Ukrainian drones, by Ukrainian Navy drones. And of course, this attack on the Russian cargo forced the Russians to use drones to carry out retaliatory strike. So that is why during the previous night, between the 28th and the 29th of May of 2026, the Russians were attacking port infrastructure of the city of Odesa and the Odesa region, and commercial vessels that were moving from port infrastructure of Ukraine in the direction of international waters. And we have this, for example, full picture. Last night, a force to prevent the free movement of vessels through the Ukrainian maritime corridor continued. Agirine 2 was used to strike the bulk carrier ANT, which was sailing under the flag of Vanuatu from the port of Odesa to Turkey. So the Russians carried out a retaliatory strike just with the purpose to have a balance. So if you attack the Russian cargo, then the Russians will attack your cargo. But the most important thing is that, as you can see, during the same period of time when the Russians were attacking the port infrastructure and vessels in the southwestern parts of the Odesa region, several Agirine drones probably were intercepted, jammed, or control over these drones were recaptured by pro-Ukrainian sources or NATO sources, and these drones moved further in the direction of the territory of Romania. So once again, basically, the Russians, it seems that were planning to attack just the southwestern parts of the Odesa region. They were planning to attack vessels, probably some port infrastructure along the river of Dunabi, but several drones were intercepted by, let's say, pro-Ukrainian sources or by a third party, and these drones moved further in the western direction. And then we start receiving reports that these Russian drones attacked several buildings on the territory of Galați. So what does it mean when talking about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine? First of all, once again, this is not the moment when the NATO countries will use the 5th NATO article, but obviously now pro-Western countries, NATO countries, and not just Romania, but also Poland, for example, will have a legal right, or let's say a legal obligation, or how to say, a moral right to use their aviation to destroy drones that are attacking, let's say, the Odesa region, or let's say the western parts of Ukraine. Because now every time when Russians launch massive drones in the direction of Odesa region, Romania will use this situation with the settlement of Galați to destroy Russian drones. Because now this is not just the drones that are attacking the territory of Ukraine, these are the drones that most likely, and not most likely, that may attack the territory of Romania as well. And due to security reasons, Romania will bring down these drones or in the area and in the sky, in the airspace of Ukraine. And the same situation most likely is going to take place if Russia decides to attack the western parts of Ukraine. This time, Poland will use its aviation to destroy Russian drones and missiles through the western part of Ukraine, through the airspace of the western parts of Ukraine. And as you can see, this episode with the settlement of Galați in Romania took place probably 12 hours before the Russian major and the biggest attack that the Russians promised to carry out on the territory of the city of Kyiv. And today, more sources and more Western experts confirm that most likely during the upcoming night, the Russians will attack the city of Kyiv, and some sources estimate that the Russians are going to use even thousands of drones, not maybe just during one wave of attack, but probably during 2 or 3 waves of attack, and hundreds of missiles. And most likely due to the situation and provocation that took place on the territory of a NATO country, most likely the Western countries and the NATO countries, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, will begin massively use their aviation to bring down Russian drones and missiles in the airspace of Ukraine. So most likely this is going to happen during this weekend, maybe not during the weekend, but obviously during the next massive attack carried out by Russians. Now let's discuss the Ukrainian attack. We have this picture that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see the approximate roads of drones that the Ukrainians used to attack the territory of Russia. And as of the morning of the 29th of May of 2026, lots of explosions were recorded in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Explosions were recorded on the territory of the settlement of Ilovaisk. In this video we can see a black smoke. This video was published this morning. A black smoke over some object of energy infrastructure, maybe a fuel depot was damaged or destroyed. In this video we can see several oil tankers that were destroyed, oil trucks that were destroyed by drones somewhere along logistic line between the territory, between these territories and the mainland of Russia. Furthermore, explosions were recorded on the territory of the city of Alchevsk, and as for this city, according to the author of this video and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians attacked and destroyed a gas station. And this is probably the third or fourth gas gas station that was destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine since the beginning of May. So as you can see, the Ukrainians also intensify their attacks on gas stations through the territories that are under control of Russians. But the biggest number of explosions were recorded through the settlement by the name of Volgograd. The sources stated that the Ukrainians attacked the Volgograd oil refinery with missiles and drones, and during the night we received lots of videos on this matter. In this video we can see a fire that broke out right after the Ukrainians attacked this object of energy infrastructure. As of the morning of the 29th of May of 2026, we don't know for sure what kind of damage the Ukrainians managed to deal, because these videos may show us just the consequences and the results of work of the Russian air defense forces. So everything is possible. And by the way, about air defense forces, it seems that the Russians are going to improve their positions, air defense positions, significantly in coming days, because the Russians adopted a law that now allows the Russians, commercial companies of Russia, to purchase air defense systems and to use air defense systems to protect their own enterprises. For example, in this video we can see how probably units of the Ministry of Defense of Russia were establishing air defense systems on the territory of a commercial building in the central part of Moscow. Probably this is exactly an example of what we have just discussed. Probably some companies purchased this air defense module and they installed this module on their commercial building with the purpose to protect their property. So most likely in coming days, more and more companies of Russia will purchase this air defense complex and they will install them through the entire territory of Russia, which means that the Russians are going to improve their air defense forces, not just on the line along the line of Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation policy, but probably commercial companies will be able to do the same. And this is a very important situation. Obviously will boost the Russian production, which will boost the Russian military industry and so on. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very important updates. This morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed and reported that up to 4 settlements were captured by Russians during the previous days. So let's discuss and let's start with the northern direction, with the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region, because according to the Group of Forces North and according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the Russians improved their position significantly along the river of Volcha. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. So this is the end of the 28th of May of 2026, and this is the beginning of the 29th of May of 2026. And according to the Minister of Defense and the Group of Forces North, the Russians improved their position significantly through the settlement of Karaichne, and the Russians forced the Ukrainians to fall back from this area, but there is a very big gap, as you can see, between the settlement of Karaichne and Bielye Kolodys, which means that when talking about these fields, there are not so many positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, which means that the Russians established strong control of the river Volcha, and most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to recapture these territories. Another important area is the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region, and according to information we have, according to the Minister of Defense and the Group of Forces North, the Russians also improved their position significantly through the settlement of Budarky. And based on these reports, we have also adjusted the map. So as you can see, the Russians are continuing tightening the news around positions, around last positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along the river of Volcha. And we believe that in coming 2 or 3 weeks, the Russians will finish the battle for this territory, and they will force the Ukrainians to fall back from the Volchansk direction, further in the southern direction towards the settlements of Bielye Kolodys, Mary Burluk, and Veliki Burluk. So the Russians are about to finish the battle for the border between Russia and Ukraine, and the next 2, 3, or maybe 4 weeks are going to be decisive, and most likely the Russians will be able to create a buffer zone along these territories, and then the Russians will decide whether to move further or to stop along this line, but most likely the Russians will continue. Another important area is the settlement of Novopidhorodne. I would like to remind you that yesterday, the Minister of Defense and the Group of Forces North stated that the Russians improved their position significantly in this area, and yesterday we adjusted the map based on these reports, and today we had additional update published by pro-Russian sources that the Russians continue advancing and improve their position significantly. As for these territories, it seems that now the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over the pocket along the river of Oskol in this area with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back. So the Kharkiv direction is becoming one of the most important directions for Russians, at least for 2026 military campaign. Now let's move further and let's talk about the situation in the Kostiantynivka direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. So this is the end of the 26th of May of 2026. This is the end of the 27th. And this is the beginning of the 28th of May of 2026. According to these changes, the Russians improved their positions through the central part significantly. And I believe that the days are numbered for the armed forces of Ukraine who are currently located in this pocket. We believe that in coming days the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this pocket, otherwise they would be caught by the Russians in Cauldron. So probably 2-3 days and the battle for the central and the southern parts of the city of Kostiantynivka finishes. Another important thing is that the Russians right now are trying to intensify their activities along the territory between the cities of Chasiv and Kostiantynivka. During the previous nights, this video was published by pro-Russian sources, and in this video we can see how Russians were dropping different documents, papers, lists, applications probably, suggesting the Ukrainians to surrender and not to show significant resistance. According to these documents, the Russians were proposing an instruction, short instruction, how to surrender and how not to fight with Russians, which means that the next days, most likely the Russians will intensify their offensive operation in this area with the purpose to take this pocket under complete control and to maintain the line before the beginning of the major battle for the Druzhkovka-Alexeyevka-Druzhkovka. Almost the same story we received from the settlement of Nudovga-Balka. Here we have almost the same video of the same type. The Russians were dropping instructions on the heads and positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, proposing them to surrender. Short instruction how to do this, which means that in coming days the Russians will intensify their offensive operation in this region as well. So the situation continued deteriorating, and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that for some reason Ukrainian drone operators in Kostiantynivka have either been eliminated or have withdrawn from the city. The Ukraine collapse in the southern parts of Kostiantynivka is expected to accelerate in June. So I heard this information from different independent sources that for some reason the Ukrainians removed their FPV drone operators from the city of Kostiantynivka further in the northern direction, probably towards the cities of Druzhkovka or Alexeyevo-Druzhkovka. And of course, if you don't have FPV drone operators, this means that your opponent will move much faster. Now we are moving to the Dnipro direction. During the previous 12 hours, we also received lots of updates from this area. And this morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the Group of Forces East confirmed that the Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the two settlements. The city of Novopidhorodne, we haven't been receiving anything from this area for a very long period of time. And today, for the first time since the beginning probably of this year, we received something from this area. And based on the report published by the Minister of Defense, we adjusted the map. So these are the changes on the ground. And this is a very important settlement because this settlement opens the Russians the Dnipro operational space, and from this settlement the Russians will continue offensive operation further to attack the settlement of Mizhovo from the east. Another important settlement is the settlement of Lisne. We have received lots of updates about the situation in this area since the beginning of May. The Group of Forces East almost every single day was publishing reports about the situation on the ground in this area, and that there are very heavy clashes on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volga. And today, on the 29th of May of 2026, the Russians published a report that they managed to break through Ukraine's defense and to take the settlement under complete control. And now from these positions, the Russians will continue offensive towards the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka Kostiantynivka and Gavrilovka. And I would like to remind you that several days ago we received a report that the Russians captured the settlement of Dobropassovo, which means that now from these positions, from these two footholds in the village of Dobropassovo and Lisne, the Russians will try to encircle Ukrainians who are currently located in this pocket. The Russians may create the Zaporozhye cauldron, the first Zaporozhye cauldron, but according to all these things that we can see right now, it seems that this is not going to be the only cauldron that we'll see during the military campaign of 2026. As for the original classic Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos of how Russians continued bombing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine through the Orekhov agglomeration. In this video, we can see FAB strikes on positions, on temporary deployment points of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the settlement of Preobrazhenka. I would like to remind you that according to the map that was yesterday leaked by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, by the end of the 9th of April of 2026, the Russians had control over more than 30% of the city of Orekhov, so everything to the south of railways were already under complete Russian control. And we have discussed the most important updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine once again. During the upcoming hours, we expect massive attacks both from Russian and from Ukrainian sides, and probably this is going to be the biggest attack. But once again, it seems that due to the situation in Romania, NATO countries, for the first time probably since the beginning of the conflict, will use their vehicles, equipment, and first of all aircraft to bring down the Russian missiles and drones over the airspace of Ukraine. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.